Hello everybody and welcome to the first episode of Breaking 2000. My name is Niels and in today's episode I'm going to show you a couple of highlights from today's games. Let's just dive into them. So in this position that you're seeing right now on the screen, I just played the move e3 to e4. My idea was to just support this knight here in the center because it's clearly my best piece in the position. And my opponent just played the move knight to f3 attacking my knight, so I thought, well, it might be just a nice way for me to just defend the knight. But in playing this move, I also created a weakness, which was this dark square here. This entire dark square complex is now up for grabs, and this is what my opponent actually did. He just played the move bishop to h6 with check, and you can see it's the best move by the engine. I, in this position, had a couple of choices that I wanted to think about. First, of course, I could just go back with the knight and defend my pawn, but I didn't think this was nice. I could also play knight to d2, which I also didn't really like, but the other option was, of course, bishop to d2, but I thought, well, bishop d2 doesn't really make that much sense. I think his bishop is worse than mine, actually, because mine is attacking his pawn chain. Meanwhile, this bishop doesn't really have a bright future. His center pawns are on on dark squares, so I thought it might be just a nicer move for me to just play king b1, which is very, very typical in these positions nevertheless. Like, you play long castle, you play king b1 almost as an automatic, but in this position it completely fails due to the fact that here my opponent has a really nice move, and if you want, you can try to find it yourself. So yeah, black has the option here to win a pawn actually, and he did that by playing knight takes e4, getting a brilliancy by chess.com. And the idea behind this move is that after queen takes e4, there is this move bishop to f5. And another diagonal is of the subject of this tactic that is evolving, which is just bishop f5. And the engine claims I can take the bishop after pawn takes, play something like g3. And apparently this is just minus 1.5, but honestly, in a real game, being tilted, losing just the queen for no particular reason, I think this would have been a lost position. So yeah, this was this very nice move, knight takes e4, which my pawn found. In the next game, I found myself playing the black pieces against white here, and I was up 2 pawns. So I was just up a b pawn, which is very nice because I can later on create a passed pawn here after eliminating or trading both these pawns. And I was up a center pawn, which is very nice. So I had a really dominant position. And so my first instinct here and the move that I played was, well, I want to take control over the second rank because that's just where the rooks belong. So I played the move rook to c2. Attacking the a2 pawn and also putting some pressure on g2, which is, I think, in many positions very nice because maybe I can later on play something like queen to c7 and get in here to harass the king. But I missed a completely, easy tactic. So in this position, my opponent could have played the move rook takes b7 with check, and this would have been not so pleasant because, well, what do I do if I play something like king g8 to get out of the check? Then suddenly queen to b4, and my opponent gets a lot of activity that I don't want. If I just take the rook, then of course, if I just take the rook, then of course my other rook is, or my own rook is just hanging, and this would have been not so good. The game, luckily for me, continued with the move queen to b4, and I just played the move rook to c1 check, king to h2, and here I found this move queen to c7 check. My opponent luckily blundered, and he blundered into a mate in 2. If you want, you can try to find it. I will give you a couple of seconds. So yeah, my first instinct here was to just play a move like rook to c2, giving a check, and maybe after king to h1, win this pawn here on g3, which also is winning, but then I found a much, much nicer solution, which is just the move queen to c2, and we get this sort of ladder mate going on. There is not so much white can do about this, and he had to play queen to d2, and here, of course, I just took the queen, and the game ended in a checkmate, so I thought this was also a very nice one to share with you. In the next game, I found myself playing the white pieces, and you can see in this position, white is a little bit better due to more space in the center. This pawn takes away very important square, f6, for example, from the defense of the black king side. And my opponent clearly didn't like that, and of course with my last move I'm also threatening to take on h7 with check. So here he just played the move f5, and if you want you can try to solve this position and see if you can do it. Because there's a very forced line here that gives white an immediate advantage, and luckily for me I found this variation. So yeah, the best move and the move that everybody plays here is the move e takes f6 en passant. If you're new to chess, this move is playable if an opponent's pawn moves up 2 squares, being side by side with your pawn. In this case, you can capture it in en passant, which I think in French means something like in passing or something. I'm not a French person, nor do I speak French, but yeah, this is what happened. Pawn takes f6, and yeah, now of course the bishop is hanging and the pawn is attacked, so he had to recapture in some way, and he chose the most logical, I would say. He played the move knight takes f6, and the pawn is defended, everything is fine. But here comes the crucial point to this combination. It's the move knight to g5, and suddenly there is a double attack on both pawns. So before I had already 3 attackers, the bishop, the queen, and now the knight on this pawn here. So there's a lot of pressure on it. And now I'm adding a new attacker to this pawn on d6. So this pawn is just defended 0 times. This pawn is defended twice. So there's at least one pawn being more attacked than defended, which means one of them is going to drop. And my opponent played the move queen to c8, just defending the central pawn on d6. Because also, please don't forget, there was also a fork hanging here. After the knight would have landed here, it would have been a really, really ugly fork. So my opponent played queen c6. I chose to capture with the knight, which is still fine. It's not completely winning, but it's fine. After knight takes h7, bishop takes h7, king h8, I played the move queen to g6, which is apparently a miss. Rook to f6, and here I played the move queen to h5. Threatening all sorts of discoveries. I think mainly the move bishop g6 is very deadly, with checkmate to follow. So my opponent had to block with the rook, but here just took the rook, and the rest of the game was quite an easy conversion, I think. Traded the light square bishops, the only active piece, and here my opponent blundered also the rook. And yeah, the rest is just a cleanup. Here in this position, it's just completely lost. I'm offering a queen trade, and my opponent can't really do anything about it. I'm just gonna gobble up more pawns, and as soon as the queens get traded, I'm just up so much material, and yeah, here my opponent resigned. Since I'm trying to improve a little bit in the course of this series, I am now focusing more on my endgames, because I feel like this is one of the weakest areas of my game. Also, chess.com confirms it. They think that I'm much, much lower rated in the endgame than in the rest of all chess skills, basically. And I think this also applies to my real games. So I'm also employed by chess.com, and we yearly meet once in the Caribbean or in Mexico. This time we met in Cancun, and there I played against some title players, and I was able to get a lot of nice position against them, but I was never able to actually win a game because I always blundered in the end game. So this is what I'm trying to focus on at the start of the series, especially. And for that, I am also studying right now a chess course called Endgame Studies 101. You can get it both on Chessable and chess.com. And this position that you're seeing right now here is from Greshban from the year of 1856. And I thought this position was very interesting because the first move that you might just play is not the move you want to go for. So in this position, black is actually trying to promote a pawn. And if they would do, then this would be bad, of course, because they would probably go for a queen. So what would you play in this position? I will give you a couple of seconds, and then you can decide what you want to do. So yeah, the most obvious move here that you can play is the move knight takes c2, of course, because this pawn is trying to promote, and we're just gonna stop it. But as you can see, it's a draw, because right now we are taking away all the squares from the black king, and we know, oops, that's not the right color. This is the right color. And we know, of course, that if you take away all the squares of a king and it's their move to move, then it's stalemate and you can't do anything about it. So knight takes c2 is obviously not the right answer, but what is the right answer? And in trying to find a solution, think about how to construct a mating net, basically. And if you would think about which pieces should belong on which square, you might come up with the answer that this knight should be on c3, because on c3 it would attack the king, and after the king, let's say, moves to to a3, then we could play this move rook to a5 check, and it would be, checkmate soon. So how do we get the knight there? Well, this square is taken, and this square is also not ideal because, like, after knight to d1, they could just capture the knight, right? But that's exactly the solution of the puzzle, actually. Because there is no good way for black to continue here, because everything is just lost. Let's just go for the most obvious choice here. If we just promote the pawn to a queen, then we are in check. But that's not a problem, because we can just play knight to c3 anyway and give a check to the king. So it's a counter check to a check, which is amazing. I love these kinds of moves. Let's just see the most obvious solution, or the most obvious continuation. King to a3. Well, the king runs, but now we have this idea that I talked about previously. Rook a5 with check. There's only one legal move. King to b2, and now king to a2 is checkmate. There is nothing that black can do here. They're just getting checkmated. So let's say you're just going to grab the knight. Well, then of course this endgame is very much winning, even on the next move, because there's only one legal movement here. Black is getting checkmated as well. So you cannot promote the pawn on c1. So what happens if you just take on d1? Well, in this position, of course, you're not in check, but you can just still take the queen, and this position is also, of course, completely lost. Let's say king to a5. Then rook to somewhere, just, take away the square end here. This is, of course, also checkmate, but there were other checkmates as well in this position. You can also take your time and, play with your foot, but I would never advise to do so. So yeah, I thought this position was very cute, a nice little trick to get black mated. And what was really crucial here was that the king is on the edge of the board. So this is a very, very bad spot for a king to be when it is dominated by your own king. This is not good if you're on the defending side. And of course, it helped that we were having this rook and this knight together. They really form a nice team to mate the black king. So today I was able to increase my blitz rating by 16 points to 1769. My highest blitz rating was 1826 historically a couple of days ago. My rapid rating unfortunately decreased from 1817 to 1801 because I lost the first game that I lost at the start of the video. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you're in for tomorrow's episode as well. Bye bye.